Welcome to the RD Squeeze. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Emily.
And we're two dietitian besties here to squeeze out the misinformation around health and nutrition. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RD Squeeze, episode 33. That kind of rhymed. We have a very special guest with us today. We have Emily Wargo, who is a dietitian and specializes in sports nutrition, and is actually my coworker because she works as an instructor of practice at Marywood University. We snatched her up from previous stuff, and we love having her, but very excited to have her. She did her bachelor's and master's at Marywood University in nutrition dietetics, and then sports nutrition and exercise science, which I believe that's how you know Emily Fashana, the co-host. So we know each other, and it's crazy how small this community is, but we are talking about energy deficient athletes. So REDS and the female athlete triad today. So REDS stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. And I'll be honest, this is my first time really hearing about this, so I can't wait to hear from most of you too, because that's why I'm talking now, because I feel like I'm not going to do a lot of talking in this episode, to be honest. So very happy to have you. Welcome, Emily.
I'm so excited to be here, not just to catch up with Emily, because it's been a very long time since we've seen each other, but also to talk about this particular topic. It is kind of near and dear to my heart. I think I was one of these athletes who suffered from this at one point in my life. So it's very close to me, and I really like talking about it and educating. So I'm excited.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that. And like I said, I mean, the reason why I thought of you for this was, in particular, your experiences with, athletes, but also kind of the eating disorder population, and just, your entire background is just very interesting. So do you want to tell us and our listeners about your background, and let's get to know you a little bit?
Sure. So like you said, Mickey, I am a graduate of Marywood in all of my education. My bachelor's is in nutrition and dietetics. My master's is in sports nutrition and exercise science. I then decided that I wanted to get a advanced degree in, or diploma, I suppose we can say, in from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So I got my diploma in lifestyle medicine. And then I still wasn't satisfied. And then I got my diploma from the International Olympic Committee in sports nutrition. And because I can't be settled, or maybe I just like the dopamine release I get from all of this, I'm a qualified instructor in mindfulness-based eating awareness training, which feels like a relatively hard pivot from the things that I just mentioned. But that came about when I was working at St. Luke's University Health Network. I was there for about 10 years, and I worked in all sorts of realms of nutrition, from inpatient to outpatient to behavioral health to long-term care, lifestyle medicine, and then eventually was kind of doing sports medicine things sprinkled amongst in that. I'm holding my pen and I don't need to be. But then I kind of pitched the idea that we need some sort of full-time sports nutrition, like that needs to be present. And that was my ending piece at St. Luke's, was fostering that program for them. All of that to say, mindfulness came in there because they wanted to offer a mindfulness-based eating awareness training for the some workers at St. Luke's, and then we were able to expand that to the general public. And mindfulness has always kind of been a side passion project of mine, and like it's a self-study project, I would say. So that all of this kind of came to fruition, and now I am teaching at Marywood and hopefully giving all of my practical experience to all these students, and hopefully they listen.
That is such a great background, and I feel like, again, we've messaged each other in between not seeing each other, and so we have some other things that put us in common, not just our names. We also both have bookshelves behind us today, so go us. Sorry, Mickey. I mean, the pineapples are great. I still love them. But I think like the background too about the mindfulness, obviously we've talked about that on the podcast, Mickey and I, and have had some guests talk about that. So definitely, incorporate that today in what we're talking about. But I want to know more, like, so the Olympic Committee diploma that you have, like what got you are there requirements for that? What got you to do that? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's not a doctorate program, but it is a postgraduate program. So I don't have a doctorate in sports nutrition. I just have this advanced diploma, I suppose we could say. I found it in my research. I was thinking about sitting for my CSSD credential, right? The certified sports nutrition credential, and you need certain hours to sit for that exam. And one of the options was this IOC diploma program. So I'm like, okay, what's this? And I looked into it, and I'm like, this is really great. You get to learn from international superstars in sports nutrition. And it's all self-directed. It's about a 2-year program. And like I said, everything's self-directed, so it's online. Graduation is in Switzerland, which I'm not going to. But it was such a well-rounded program because it teaches you all of the clinical nutrition aspects, but then it also relates all of that clinical background into practical advice. So it goes through different types of sports, breaks down the energy systems that are used in that sport and how to fuel them efficiently. And it feels like, I'll rephrase, I feel like I'm a more well-rounded sports dietitian because of this program.
That's awesome. And again, both of us also having that sports nutrition and exercise science masters. That's kind of where we met. I think I don't think in undergrad. But having that, so do you feel like it's like a one step up from that too? Because I feel like the exercise science kind of brought, that side into the sports nutrition world. We learned about some of the exercise science, like testing, and then how the energy is utilized and whatnot. So would you say that it's then like kind of almost that next step up from there?
Yes, I do. And not to knock our degree by any means, but I do feel like it is an extra layer, because the master's degree was a really nice stepping stone into sports nutrition and exercise science. And then this advanced degree just kind of developed all of these skills. I have a much more developed toolbox, I think I would say.
Yeah, nice. So then the mindfulness based eating. So I'm an intuitive eating counselor. Awesome. So then what's the difference between that and what you have?
That's a great question. They're so similar, except I
was gonna say, or similarities.
they are so incredibly similar. The biggest difference for mindfulness-based eating training is we physically meditate around food. And that is part of what I'm qualified to do, is actually conduct meditation around food. One of the things that, or I'll rephrase and say, the first things that we try to meditate around are very small. Raisins or some sort of dried fruit in that capacity is where we start. And then we work our way all the way up to eating something that's our favorite savory and or sweet food. So our favorite kind of like temptation food, we learn how to meditate and eat mindfully and really savor the flavor and be present in the moment, non-judgment with the food that's in front of you.
I did that today. I did a mindful eating exercise with my patients today during work. So that's exactly what I did. So there's definitely like correlations. Mm-hmm. I would love to also like continue to build upon that. So maybe I'll have to go and do that one next. and the Olympic sport one.
There you go.
Well, thanks for sharing all that. Anything else? Anything we've missed? Anything you didn't touch on yet about your background?
I don't think so.
Or that you want listeners to know about you?
My goodness. No, not at the moment. I'm sure as we continue this discussion on low energy availability, I'm going to bring some of my own personal story into this too. So yeah, I think indirectly people are going to learn a lot about me today too.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely stuff is going to come out, and you do have such an interesting background, and like it's. I love how you said, like, I don't know if it's just like the dopamine release, but like I feel like all dietitians, like, we're constant, like, continuous learners. Like, we're always like, what's the next thing that we can look up or do or educate ourselves on? And I do appreciate that continuing education part of our profession, and like many other professions. But I do find that like that's a commonality between all dietitians. It's just like we have that thirst for knowledge. We have that like drive, and I appreciate that you were like, yeah, I wanted to do this, and you know, you kept going for it. And I just really like that. But so, yeah, we brought you on this podcast because we are having a women's health theme going kind of for this season. We might end up straying away from it a little bit, but for now we're on that track. And we really wanted to pull you in because you work with athletes a lot. And I know for me, I've picked your brain about presenting the students at Marywood, and Emily and I were talking like she'd be the perfect guest for talking about the female athlete triad and then also REDS, which is a new concept to me. So why don't you introduce us to what those things are and let's talk about it.
Let's dive in. All right. So I will start with saying that I might use some phrases interchangeably. Low energy availability, LEA. I might use that synonymously, so I might just abbreviate it. And I think that's really the only one that I wanted to touch on first. So all of that preface to say that we've come a long way, I would say maybe in the past 2 to 3 decades, with our understanding of energy availability in athletes. So kind of to start, most people are familiar with the term the female athlete triad. And that was formed in around 97. It was considered a syndrome by the American College of Sports Medicine. So the ACSM developed this formal name for the syndrome. And it was recognizing the common presentation between, eating disorders, osteoporosis and bone injury, and an irregular menstrual cycle, which I might use the term amenorrhea. So irregular menstrual cycle and amenorrhea, I'm using those two interchangeably too. So fast forward 10 years, the Female Athlete Triad Coalition is formed. All they really did was further refine the definition of the female athlete triad that was developed by the ACSM. Amongst their redefining of the triad, they wanted to evolve it into more of a spectrum versus a hard triad. So if we're looking at this visually, the triad that was developed in 1997 is appear like a triangle, right? In 2007, we're looking at more of a 3D model, and we can view this 3D model as almost as a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum is the female athlete triad, that it's that relationship between amenorrhea, bone injury, and eating disorders. On the other end of the spectrum now, we have optimal energy availability, optimal bone health, and regular menstrual cycle. But within these two ends of the spectrum, we have a lot of nuances. And we'll get into more detail about those nuances, and I'm going to continue. Okay. So now, after 2007, we're going to fast forward another 7 years to 2014, where the International Olympic Committee had a task force that was specifically designated to low energy availability. And they developed the concept of REDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport. The Female Athlete Coalition then redefined their consensus, I guess they'll use that word. They redefined their consensus in 2018 to include males. So like you said, we're talking all about women's health, but I am going to touch upon males just a little bit. And then let's fast forward to 2023, the most recent information that we have right now. The International Olympic Committee put out a new consensus statement in 2023 on LEA and REDS, and they developed an updated screening tool that we can use clinically. So I would say that's the history of the female athlete triad and how it's kind of coalesced into something a little bit more pragmatic and much more detailed.
I think that history is, really important to know. And I do think, that there's things that have evolved, and, we have so many different, like gender identities too. So like it also helps kind of bridge the gap between different gender identities as well, because now it's just not focused on like female specifically. There's an inclusion piece to that as well, which I can appreciate. well, we all can appreciate, I believe. So, I do like how it kind of evolved to include more of that. And just because we are focusing on women's health in a way, obviously there's multi-faceted components to everybody's health, and, that's our theme. But, we include men, and we're including, all genders. So I just appreciate, that history and that background, because I don't think for somebody that doesn't have a nutrition background, this is going to be something that they probably never even heard of to begin with. So to see how it's evolved, I think is really important. But go ahead, Emily. The other Emily, I'm sorry.
It's probably too like something that, so I know, and Emily, you mentioned earlier that you kind of have a personal background a little bit to why this topic also hits home. And I can kind of agree. It's in a way what got me into nutrition partly. I mean, I love prevention and nourishing your body, but also that sports side. I was a sporty, athletic kid, and I know what we know now. I was completely at one, maybe not fully eating disorder, but like I was not nourishing my body whatsoever. And we know high school kids are not doing that. Like even middle school, elementary kids are probably not nourishing their bodies as well as they should be if they're an athlete. So moving forward, and we've seen this, how huge sports nutrition has become in our profession. But I think that's a big reason why people got into it. And I think this topic is one of the main drivers of that.
I agree. And as you're mentioning, underfueling yourselves as a high school or middle school athlete, it's when I speak to that age group, and when parents are involved, sometimes that like they give me a stink eye, but I'm not focusing on these ultra, super healthy options, right? I'm saying if all you have is a Pop-Tart for breakfast, eat Pop-Tart. Because the fact that these kids are underfueling themselves to such a magnitude, it's manifesting in these long-term health consequences. So all of that to say, I think going into what low energy availability really means this is a good segue to do so.
Yes.
But before I define that, I need to talk about something that sounds rather boring, but it's kind of about evolutionary theory. So bear with me. Science nerd here, so bear with me.
We're all science nerds in some level, right? I mean, we wouldn't be in dietitians if we weren't. So go for it.
Excuse me. Okay. So think about, we're putting ourselves like Darwinian evolutionary theory here. There's this theory that there's competitive relocation of limited energy sources to survive biological stress. And to survive that biological stress, we want to make sure that we're not disrupting our genetic code in some capacity. There's 4 principal areas that this kind of deals with. The first one is reproduction. So it's a downregulation of the connection between your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, and either your ovaries, if you were born with female parts, and the connection between the hypothalamus, pituitary, and testicles if you were born with male parts. There's also something called somatic maintenance, and this is when certain essential maintenance processes in your body cannot trade energy resources, otherwise life is threatened. So we can also rephrase that as your body's going to pick and choose which things in it needs to survive. So it's going to pick the most important things. Your heartbeat, your lungs breathing, your gut function, your brain function, right? It's going to pick the most important things for you to survive. What it's not going to pick is reproduction. It's not going to send energy to your reproductive hormones because it doesn't see that as a biological need at that point in time. The other 2 are growth. So we're looking at youth and pediatric kids here. If they're not feeding themselves enough, your body is not going to grow. If you don't have enough energy, I'll rephrase that. Your body's going to send that energy to, again, the most important things, and growth might not be the most important thing at that time. And the last one needs more research, but it's our immunity and our immune defense. So we need more research to better understand how energy availability reacts with our immune system, specifically in athletes. So all of that to say, we can define low energy availability as the individual's dietary energy that we intake throughout the day needs to be sufficient to support the energy that we expend that's required for health, function, homeostasis after the cost of energy, the cost of energy for exercise. Most importantly, it's very difficult to assess low energy availability because it's so nuanced. We think of energy balance as this very simple equation of energy in minus energy out equals balance. But we're not thinking about the energy it costs for our hormones to function, for our body to breathe, for our gut to function, on top of all of the energy we're expending during exercise. And if you're a D1 college athlete, you're expending a heck of a lot of energy just to train. So if we're thinking of athletes that are students, how are you going to expend all that mental energy to get your work done if all of these other things in your body aren't functioning properly? Right? So this gets to be so nuanced. There's no threshold for energy availability. How it manifests in one person may not be the same in another person.
The individuality of nutrition.
Here we are.
Yeah, so again, like for people that have no background in nutrition and they say, oh, can't you just make me a meal plan? That's our favorite saying, is it not? And it's like, we can't just do that because there are all of these nuances just in like I said, just taking just a normal human being who is not this high performing athlete or just a student athlete that's growing or whatever. We're not even taking into consideration just that. We're taking into consideration just a normal, regular person. And then adding all of that, like I said, there's a lot of different things happening. And, I appreciate that history as well, because I don't think people think of that like as, as a priority in what we see as nutrition, like in fueling our bodies. Like if your body's going to want to survive, it's going to function on, prioritize the function of the needed like organs and functions. And like I said, what's going to go first? Like I said, reproduction, growing, those things aren't mandatory for our survival. Maybe the human race, different story, but like for us, like it's not a priority. So I appreciate like that history behind it.
And I'm also thinking, and I'm sure Mickey, you can relate and understand this part, but even for the students listening, if there are dietetic students listening, we have equations to calculate metabolic rate, resting metabolic rate, basal metabolic rate, all those types of things. And that's kind of where Emily was going. And we have like an activity factor we can add on to that. But to clarify, like, it's not just that. We have so many other factors that we have to consider for our metabolic needs that we can't just do a simple calculation and get it. We can get an average, we could get a very rough estimate, but it's not everything.
Well, I'm sorry, both Emily's. I'm just going to pop in with this, but like, even that's why we've been saying for, I don't know, since the end of time that BMI is garbage, because there's so many, like, it's not just this equation that tells people if they're healthy or not. Like, that's not how that works, because there's so much body mass, like, factors that go into how that works. And like I said, it's the same thing for your energy needs and being energy deficient and not deficient or whatever. Like, it's important to, take into consideration all that. It is very individualized. And then I was thinking back to like, I don't know, like about you guys in like high school. Like I was an athlete, but I wasn't a good athlete. But like, I remember what I ate for lunch, and I remember what, like, I like, it was not anything that would have sustained me for a long day. And I never ate breakfast. I was one of those kids that's probably why I have so many problems now, because I'm like, I never ate. Like, it's just wild. And like I said, the things that students have available to them, and just, the lack of knowledge behind that, and the lack of priority to those students, I think is sad. And I appreciate the work that you both do for that reason. But anyway, sorry, I'll stop rambling.
No, just to your point, Mickey, I also can tell you what I ate as a student athlete in high school at lunchtime. And it was nachos and cheese, maybe a cookie, and a Powerade.
Yep, that's it. I would have a chicken patty, no bun. I take the bun off. Not because I don't like bread. I don't like bread. Not because I was like avoiding it. I just didn't like bread. I don't know. I'm a weirdo. And then I would have a cookie. I would have a white cheddar bag of popcorn and a Snapple. that was my high school lunch for most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that wasn't enough to feed a 15-year-old kid. Like,
no, but the lunch cookies were the best cookies because they were like the size of your face and so moist and hot, like, and they were 50 cents, at least in my school.
I say, Emily, I don't know. We didn't go to the same school, so I can't say for sure, but I don't think, mine were good, but I don't think they were that good.
Oh, yeah. Anyway,
and I had Wendy's fries and a Frosty at 9:00 at night after volleyball practice.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that sounds reminiscent too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, next up, I know you had you said, I want to go into this part first. So, like, next up, what are we talking about when, we're going into these nuances of...
I think since we're talking about what we've been eating as athletes, I think it's good to go into the causes of this, because a lot of these causes, I'll rephrase that, it could be very unintentional. Maybe inadvertent is a better word to use here. But it's really because of a variety of factors. Lack of education. You just don't know that you're underfueling yourself. You might have your appetite hormones in and around exercise might be either suppressed might be suppressed. And that's going to obviously affect how much you're intaking. So, and it's very common and normal for that to happen after exercise, for your appetite to be suppressed. So it's not an out of the ordinary thing, but it's something to be mindful of, that it can severely inhibit the amount that you're intaking. Of course, there's going to be intentional causes of low energy availability. It might be as severe as an eating disorder or disordered eating. We can also classify that in particular as obsessive. So to be more clear, the 3 different categories or causes of LEA can be obsessive origins, intentional causes, and then inadvertent causes. So the obsessive origins is going to be the diagnosed disordered eating or eating disorders. The intentional causes might be more, let's use an example, a wrestler who is trying to make weight and doesn't know about these nuances of low energy availability and is just trying to manipulate their body weight in the only way they know how, which might be severe calorie restriction on top of dehydration techniques, on top of exercising with a trash bag on, all of these other things that might be happening, which they're trying to lose weight, but not to the severity that it ends up happening. So all of those causes, no matter what the cause is, you're going to have signs and symptoms, right? I'm going to focus on hormone function pretty heavily here, because when we're clinically trying to screen for LEA and REDS, we look at hormone function first. So if you were born with female parts, it's going to be an irregular or a complete loss of your menstrual cycle for at least 3 months. It also could be, not always, it could be failure to achieve your menstrual cycle by 15 years old. Biochemically, we're looking at low estrogen levels and low luteinizing hormone. And I'm going to go into more detail about screening for those things after I go through all of these signs and symptoms. I feel like I get ahead of myself sometimes.
And just to self-plug us really quick, if you haven't listened to the last 2 episodes with Aubrey Red, you should go do that, because we talk about, female hormones and luteinizing hormone. We talk about that in extent. Well, Aubrey talks about that in extent. So that's the precursor to this episode, yes, if you haven't. And Emily could probably talk a lot about that too, but that was kind of the precursor to this. So in case you're like, what is that? Go listen to the past 2 episodes.
There we go.
Go ahead, Emily.
And then I do want to briefly touch upon folks who are born with male parts, because more and more research is coming out telling us that males are folks born with male parts are absolutely suffering from this too. So this could be low serum testosterone levels, which if you're not getting a blood test, that could be seen with just an overall low sex drive and a decrease in morning erections. So this brings up the point of healthy, safe conversations around reproductive health. Because how many 15-year-old males are going to talk to a female dietitian about their decreased morning erections? Right?
Yeah,
So,
well,
definitely
in their
not.
dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not gonna. Well, and like they're not gonna tell their family members probably about it, unless you have a very good relationship with
Right.
whoever you're living with, your caregivers, whatever.
Mhm.
But like if if you're embarrassed about that, like how are you gonna bring that up? Let alone to somebody that you don't really
Exactly.
know. Like that's complicated in itself.
Mhm.
And even girls, I mean, we periods are so taboo to talk about,
Mhm.
let alone erections. Like all of that is so. I hate to use the word, but stigmatized. Like we don't talk about that stuff enough at a young age, and it's so like ooh embarrassing. Like so, kids don't want to talk about that stuff, but it is important in actual health function. Like that is a factor. So
It is.
but
And I've heard conversations where they're considering the menstrual cycle a fifth vital sign. And if it is that important in our overall well-being, we have to be comfortable talking about it. And I agree, Mickey, it starts in the home and having that comfort to talk about this with the people who are raising you, right? As well as health educators and physical education educators. I think we have room to grow in that arena too, and having safer and more open, honest conversations about this. I'm going to tell a very quick anecdotal story. On Instagram, I was following an account that was talking about, just female sports in general. And one of the posts was a woman who was very upset that the athletic trainer asked her underage daughter about her menstrual cycle and whether it was regular or not. And the woman was so upset because it wasn't a physician who was talking about it. It wasn't a woman who was talking to her daughter about it. And she just didn't understand the concept of why this needed to be talked about in a pre-participation physical. So I tried to do my best in educating in the comment section. Like, I talked about REDS and LEA and all of that. The backlash that I received was incredible. People were calling me the problem in terms of like feminism and womanism. And they were saying that I'm the problem. I don't understand. Here we are. We need to have more open and honest conversations. I am beating a dead horse here, but I think it's the stigmatism, like you said, and the stigma around it. It's detrimental to our kids' health, I think.
And I'm sorry that happened to you as well, but like that is like the product of ignorance. I guess that's probably like a crappy word to use, but like it's just we're so uneducated in that level, and it is also the product of like I want to say victim blaming in a way, or I don't know, like because what they're stemming at is the person asking is a criminal, right? Like that's what they're probably insinuating, right? Like this person is a pervert or something. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's what they're probably like, why are they asking about that? But it's like, no, they're not all like they're genuinely concerned about their health and they're well trained to ask that. And instead they're it's seen as like this bad thing to talk about. And it shouldn't necessarily be. Like there's other indicators of somebody being a pervert, like or a sex criminal, whatever. I can't think of like a more tasteful word to use, but like there's more indicators of that, but that is not one of those things. And obviously you should still be involved in your kids' life in terms of what their activities they're in and have relationships with the person that they're spending time with, like coaches, trainers, whatever. But at the same time, like they're just doing their job too. So that it's a shame that kind of happened, and I'm sorry that you got that backlash from people just not understanding that is vital. But
very vital. And granted, hormonal change is not the only thing that happens in LEA. There are a slew of other things that your body will how your body will adjust to having low energy availability. your bones, for example, we'll start there. Bone health is incredibly important. And ironically, this does relate back to hormone function because estrogen plays a really huge role in bone health. And if you have low estrogen, not only is your menstrual cycle going to be off, but your bone health is going to suffer too. So you could have recurrent stress fractures. You could have a traumatic fracture due to minor force. And a lot of this comes back to not just low estrogen, but low vitamin D and calcium as well, right? Our endocrine system starts to be disrupted. That could be hypothyroid symptoms. It could be a diagnosis of PCOS. What else? I'm missing a big one, I know. Growth and development. Let's talk about specifically in pediatrics. This could be slower than normal development for their age. They could lose quite a bit of weight in about a month or so. So if you're noticing severe weight loss in your child, and this is where BMI sometimes comes into play. I agree with you guys that BMI is becoming a very irrelevant tool. However, I think it can still be useful when it comes in terms of growth charts, especially when we're looking at maybe a young athlete is at risk for low energy availability. We can still plot their BMI on a growth chart and see if they're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a starting point, I would say.
Yeah, but in terms of adult athletes, I totally agree that BMI is irrelevant. Last but not least, in terms of signs and symptoms, it is psychological symptoms that we need to pay attention to as well. And this area gets rather gray because, are we paying enough attention to our athletes to detect any changes in mood? Or are we there just kind of going about our day to day and not really paying attention to them as a person? It may be someone who just is naturally an anxious person, or maybe they do have a diagnosis of depression in some capacity. So there tends to be a psychological component on top of it, especially when you get into the realm of the folks who are maybe a little obsessive in their eating patterns, however that may manifest. Oh my gosh, there's cardiovascular symptoms, there's GI symptoms. I could go on and on about the signs and symptoms that can arise from low energy availability. I think.
So does it? Can I interrupt a little bit? Does it
Sure.
kind of mimic? I will say, because as you were going on, these issues also occur. They might not be the exact same or as severe, I will say, but mimic some eating disordered eating risks that can happen.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. And this is where the diagnosis of low energy availability gets very complicated because everything overlaps, and where and how, all of that to say, I think this is why a multidisciplinary approach is so incredibly important for these people, because it's not just the dietitian who needs to work with them. It is a mental health professional and the sports medicine physician and the athletic trainer and the gynecologist, or a endocrinologist, excuse me. So, what else am I missing? Sports performance coaches. So everybody has to be involved to take great care of these people who are suffering from this. Yes, to kind of circle back, I feel like I'm rambling again, long-winded. But yes, you do notice that a lot of these signs and symptoms overlap with eating disorders and disordered eating.
And are there certain sports that you might see these specifically in? I mean, we mentioned wrestling already. Mm-hmm. So any other sports that you kind of, they're higher risk, we will say, sure, and high alert?
Yes, absolutely. Anyone who's in a sport that is aesthetically judged. So that could be our gymnasts, our figure skaters, our dancers. Absolutely our dancers. We don't want to forget about our performing artists. So that's dancers. That could be marching band. That's actors. Yes, I think I got everyone in there. And then anyone who has a weight-based sport. So we talked about wrestling. So anyone who has to weigh in before they perform. And then anyone who's in a gravitational type sport. So that's endurance runners. So anyone who has to compete against gravity in the sport that they do. So you could also rephrase that as the sports where you would consider the lighter the better. I don't even like using that. But just for relational purposes, I guess, the sports that you think of where being lighter would be advantageous. So that could.
And what's the one sport the intern I was with, rowing? What else is that called? Is it rowing?
Yeah, rowing.
It's rowing. Okay, so that one is one because the lighter the mass of the boat, the faster you move on the body.
Yep.
The body of water, I should say.
Jockeys is another one that is kind of not thought about, right? Being lighter on your horse. This just popped into my head right now. What would you think about like motorsports? Would that matter? Like,
I have heard, yes. So that is definitely one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that thought just really popped into my brain right now, and I haven't thought about it prior to this. So I wonder if motorsports would be something that you would want to be lighter in your car. Clearly, I'm a little naive on motorsports.
You know what?
But...
I'm sorry, but this is like a very Pennsylvania coded statement that I'm about to say. So you know the flying turns at Knoebels, that roller coaster, they weigh you, and like it seems like, oh, why do they have to weigh you? But the reason why is because, you know, in order they can't have so much weight in the cart and on the track and like all going at the same time, because it is a trackless coaster that like needs a certain amount of weight distributed so it can move as fast as, you know, whatever. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a physics major, clearly. But like, like, I was just thinking like in Pennsylvania coded words, like let's use that as an example. But like you said, maybe any sort of motorsports, or like, you know, even race cars, I'm sure that probably has an effect. Or cool runnings, like we're all millennials on this one. Yeah, like bobsleds, like that would be one, right? So like there's
So I have never been to Knoebels. Now, I am not from Pennsylvania. I am going next month. So I will avoid that ride.
Don't avoid it. It's very fun. It's just they don't, like, your weight doesn't get displayed anywhere. But like, it is a very fun ride. I'm not going to say it's not. And Knoebels is amazing. They have the best food. But oh, Emily, I can't believe you've never been before. That's like...
No, I know. We're having a cookout there with a group that I belong with. So yeah, it'll be fun. I'm going finally.
Cool. But yeah, I was just thinking of that.
Let's talk about consequences. I mentioned PCOS, and I kind of want to circle back to that. So PCOS can be reported in female athletes, and it's been reported to be related to LEA. So we know that correlation does not cause causation. However, when you have a diagnosis of an irregular menstrual cycle or a missing menstrual cycle for a very long time, you can get something called, or be diagnosed with something called functional hypothalamic amenorrhea. This requires looking at sex hormones. This requires really a skilled gynecologist has to look at your hormone profile, and usually they might do an ultrasound as well to look for any sort of cysts. But all of that to say, when this imbalance between your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, and your ovaries is happening for so long, it becomes a chronic suppression. And remember, in the beginning, when I was talking about the life history theory, I mentioned genetic coding, and we don't want any sort of disruption to our genetic code. This is what can happen, where this long-term suppression of your hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis is suppressed for so long that PCOS develops because the genes rewire themselves.
Wow, that's amazing. That is so interesting, but I see it, you know?
Yeah, and that's huge. And I'm bringing that up in particular because of the case study of someone that I worked with that I mentioned to you guys before we started. This is how I'm going to introduce her here, because her journey ended in this diagnosis. I worked with her for quite some time, and she initially came to me wanting to train for triathlons. And her background was she was overweight, and she lost about 100 pounds in about a year. So it was quite quick to lose that amount of weight, all on her own. With diet and exercise, she did great. However, when she switched to training for triathlons, she didn't change her eating habits, and she was very ingrained in that diet mentality where carbohydrates are bad, they're going to make me fat, they make me bloated, fat is the bad F word, high protein everything. A lot of diet products using, diet yogurts, sugar-free this, no fat that, so you get my drift, where her mindset was not necessarily fuel for the work required. It was do the work that's required and then not feel myself enough because of, whatever shame or guilt that's been ingrained in me because of this diet culture. All of that to say, as we started to kind of go through what she was eating and what her life looked like, she eventually dropped the bomb that she had been missing her menstrual cycle for, I think, about 3 to 6 months. I don't recall. So this is where all of the layers kind of started building, right? So long of the short is the 3 years that I worked with her, we did all of this testing, right? We got her hormone profile looked at. We checked her bones. She got a DEXA scan. We saw just kind of the clinical textbook manifestations of low energy availability that was transitioning into REDS. So she had basically non-existent luteinizing hormone and estrogen. Her testosterone was very high. She ended up seeing a gynecological endocrinologist, which honestly, I didn't even know that was a thing until she said, I'm going to switch from my gyno to this person. And it was wonderful because this new provider knew exactly what was happening, but understood what could possibly be happening. So we eventually got to a point of, is it the chicken or the egg, right? Was it the underfueling that caused this? Or was it, something else metabolically that was happening? So the gyno understood that this could be an issue of underfueling, but it also could be something else. So she continued to do testing and ended up finding that she ended up being diagnosed with a functional hypothalamic amenorrhea and PCOS. And then I talked to her about all of this, and we kind of came to the conclusion that we think that since she lost that weight so fast in a year, right? She lost 100 pounds in about a year. All of that weight loss was kind of the beginning of all of this, where her hormones were so unbalanced since that massive weight loss, and they never really recovered once she transitioned into triathlon training. So the kicker of all of this was she was still training, and she was killing it. She was PRing in her half marathon times. She was performing wonderfully. So that is a testament to, you can't go off of just one indicator for this. Because even though internally her body was telling us that something's wrong, performance-wise, she was a great athlete and she was working through everything. Another thing that we found out was that body fat percentage actually played a really big role for her. At the time, the machine that I had available, either the machine wasn't working correctly or we were in between machines. Either way, the point is we were using a body fat percentage that she got from her home scale. Not ideal by any means, but we worked with that number. Eventually, when I was able to take that number for myself, I think her scale was telling her she was 23% body fat. My scale said she was about 16% body fat.
Wow.
Big difference, right? So that when I redid all of my redid all of my calculations because of this, and I found out that we were still underfeeding her by probably a solid 500 to 800 calories. So I learned a lot during this. She was, dare I say, my guinea pig. But it is a really good success story at the end of this. She eventually did have a period kind of sputter back a little bit as we worked together. And she's still a wonderful athlete. She's still competing and she's still killing it. So there was a good and happy ending to that case.
Yeah. And I think the important, right at the end here, talking body fat is huge for what, Emily? In the sense of, we don't want to be too low as females.
We need body fat to stimulate our menstrual cycle. It has to be there. We can go by clinical indicators. I think the lowest a woman can go safely is around 15 to 16% body fat, which still feels very low to me. Men, on the other hand, can go down to something absurd like 3%, 5%, something like that. But it's necessary. And again, our diet culture tells us that fat is the enemy, but we need fat on our body for our essential processes.
Yep.
Yes. So this is I keep using the word nuanced, and I'll use it again. It's a very nuanced condition. But it's 100% preventable. Education, honest, open conversations about reproductive health. I think it would be most beneficial to have some sort of screening protocol within the pre-participation physical. Right now, I think a lot of athletic trainers are screening for eating disorders and disordered eating, which doesn't necessarily capture this. So that's why there are specific LEA and RED screening tools that are available. The International Olympic Committee has one free on the internet available that you can implement into any sporting program.
Awesome. So like, how many questions is that?
Oh, that's a great question. How many? I don't remember off the top of my head. It's not long.
Okay.
Comparatively to SCOFF, which is about 5 questions,
Yep.
it's more than that. I'm going to say it's anywhere between 10 to 15.
Okay. And SCOFF is for the eating disorders,
Yeah, SCOFF is specifically for eating disorders too.
Yeah. I think screening is huge. I mean, it's prevention. It's catching something to say, ooh, that might be a little bit of a red flag. You know, we're not diagnosing with a screen. We are just saying, let's look into it further. Yep. And anywhere, like in nutrition, we have the malnutrition screening tools and the PGSA, like those things are catching things before they become too much of a problem that then they can really be hard to correct.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head, Emily. This is such a preventable diagnosis. And it feels like a simple solution of educating and screening, right? But what are the what's the word I'm looking for? What are the walls or the hurdles that we have to overcome to implement these sorts of things, right? Stigma.
Parents,
funding. Does the school even have an athletic trainer available? We have to think about really rural places here too, right? Where a high school in rural Nebraska, go Big Red, might not have an athletic trainer available. So this is some of the realities of some high schools that we have to think about. So, and if they don't have an athletic trainer, then we're turning to the coaches. And how much education is available for the coaches? How much does the coach want to educate themselves, right? How open are they to changing their practices if their practices might be, unsafe or unhealthy?
And I think that's the hardest part too. And I think just more in the disordered eating disorder world, like there are plenty of providers, but it's also a specialty. So yes, there are fewer. And, I deal with this at my own workplace is like, we're kind of ignoring asking the questions because we don't almost want to deal with it. We can't do that. That's unethical that we're doing that. And we have to. It's harmful if we don't.
Yeah. And I like quoting Emmanuel Acho very often when he said we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And this absolutely applies. We have to be comfortable with asking the uncomfortable questions. If that means we have to ask a 15-year-old boy if they're getting morning erections or not, I've done it. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, they blush. Yeah, I might be blushing too, right? But I still have to ask the question. And then that goes vice versa. Guys have to be comfortable with asking young ladies about their menstrual cycle. And that gets even more dicey. I understand that. I do. But I think that, again, circles back to stigma and creating open and safe conversations and spaces to have these discussions about reproductive health.
Yeah.
If we take away the stigma, then we won't have this awkward, uncomfortable feeling.
Right. And in your example too, or your case study, we'll say this as, were there any symptoms that you did not mention or signs that can occur beyond that. So anything that this patient of yours didn't have that might occur within REDS or LEA.
Yeah, what didn't she? Something that she was, that she did have going on that I didn't mention was some GI issues. She wasn't diagnosed with celiac, but what was it? UC. She had ulcerative colitis.
Okay.
She followed gluten-free just because she felt better on it. She reduced symptoms. Totally fine. But I bring that up because I wonder how much of that was correlated with her underfueling, because that diagnosis was relatively recent when she started to see me. There are cardiac abnormalities that can happen. My case study that I'm talking about, she didn't have any of these issues, but you can have a reduced heart rate. You might have some orthostatic hypotension where you're standing up fast and you're kind of getting lightheaded. And in severe cases, you could start to develop arrhythmias if you're not getting the appropriate electrolytes you need for your heart to function.
And how about like slow recovery from workouts and like fatigue and it's getting sick?
Thank
like
you.
those are things, right?
I'm focusing a lot on the clinical aspects of this. It's wonderful to bring up the training aspects of this. So thank you, Emily. And sometimes when I start mentioning this to some of the kids I talk to, sometimes I see the light bulb go on when I talk about this. So yeah, internally, your body is telling you that something's wrong. There are cases like my gal who was able to PR in her half marathon times. But in most scenarios, you're going to see a decrease in your performance, especially when it comes to the training that you're putting in. Your body is not adapting to all of that training. So you're putting in all the work on the field and the gym, wherever you are, and you're doing all of these, I don't know, maybe you're working on technical aspects, speed, enter whatever, agility that you're working on, right? Your body's not adapting. You're not learning. Dare I say, you're not getting better. And on top of that, your recovery is then altered. If you're not eating enough in that 24 to 48 hour period of recovery after a bout of exercise, that's a huge period of replenishment for an athlete. And if you're not fueling yourself enough, you're not going to be recovering well. You're not going to be having all of that muscle growth that you're looking for. You also, fatigue, you're going to feel tired. And that kind of sounds like a no-brainer, right? You're not eating enough, you're going to feel tired. But when you're an athlete and your focus is playing time and, dare I say, perfectionism, dare I say, people pleasing, right? You're very goal oriented and task oriented, and you want to achieve. An athlete's going to ignore certain symptoms if it means that they aren't going to play. And that goal oriented and drive for success is a great thing to have, but it can be detrimental to us athletes. So it is important to remember to check in with yourself every once in a while. I feel like I got off topic on that one and I was rambling a little bit. But all of that to say, I think ultimately we have a responsibility here, kind of going back to what you mentioned in the ethical terms of we have to make sure that we're keeping our athletes safe, first and foremost. And that brings up the question, when do we suggest removal from sport participation? That might be a rhetorical question.
I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a rhetorical question. I mean, I'm sure there's been scenarios that you could think of that's come up. So when, I mean, I know there's no like probably definitive answer, but how do you approach that topic?
I never want to tell an athlete that they can't play. No one wants to tell them that. But, if we're taking the Hippocratic Oath here, we're not physicians, but if we're still taking that Hippocratic Oath and saying we're doing no harm to our patients, we have to tell them to stop playing when they're going to harm themselves. And you might get a lot of pushback from parents, from the athlete, from coaches, but you are the health expert. So we need to be strong in our ground in saying, I'm not doing this to be a problem. I don't want to make waves. I'm doing this and suggesting that we pull back from training or participating altogether because this person's going to hurt themselves if they don't.
And I think that's, go ahead.
I was going to say, is there a time frame for that? That's tough to say, right? We don't want to pull someone too early or we don't want to pull them too late, right? So I suppose it depends on the severity and the condition of the person, right?
And I think that's where that multidisciplinary approach comes in. Like, hey, coach is noticing, parents are noticing, athletic trainers questioning, and they're like, this seems a little off. Refer to your dietitian, refer to your physician of your school teams, and talk together as kind of like an interdisciplinary meeting kind of thing, and say, look, here's the signs. This is my approach. So where do you feel that that's a more appropriate approach than like us as the dietitian saying like, no, they shouldn't be playing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gets complicated depending on what the dynamic is of the athletic department and who's available, right? That one sports medicine physician might be stretched between 3 schools, right? So we are trying to foster a dialogue between the people who are in direct contact with that athlete the most. 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the athletic trainer. In my experience thus far, those are the people who are contacting me first saying, I'm concerned about this athlete. What should I do? And that's when, we kind of go down the road of, okay, who else have you talked to? Who else do we need to get involved?
That's a huge win for dietitians, I think. And my goal, like, I know my paths have kind of changed a little bit, but like my goal is still like, we need dietitians within, just like a sports physician. Get a dietitian in there, just as you had in your previous role. Like, be able to do those things because we're available, and that's what we want to do. We want to help kids learn and be educated, and the coaches and the parents. That's what we want to do, and we're not there to be the bad guy. We're there to make sure your kids grow up and are nourished and grow and can get on to the next point in their lives without having injuries and hormonal imbalances and endocrine disruptions and immunity issues and all the things we've already talked about.
All of those things. And once you're in this space of LEA and or REDS, the time to recovery could be weeks, it could be years. And that could be a little scary, right? If you, like the person that I worked with, it took her well over a year and a half to finally have some sort of normality or homeostasis back in her body. Granted, she was an adult. So, I think I should make that clear that we had that discussion of whether she should stop training or not. But she was an adult, so she can make the decision that she wants to make. When you're working with kids, you might have to make that decision for them. They're not going to be happy with you, but you still have to make that decision if they're going to be harming themselves. And the longer you wait to make that decision, you might be spending months to years to get their body back into a normal space. And that's huge for a high school athlete, right? Especially if they had dreams of playing in college. Like it could derail you. It can.
So we talked a lot about like the untreated consequences, long, short term. Anything like other signs and symptoms, like performance related, psychological, that maybe we want to touch on that we didn't get to yet? I think we hit quite a few of them.
I can try and think of some other performance related things. Carbohydrate availability, which would be important for all athletes, but particularly our endurance athletes who are relying on their carbohydrate stores to fuel them. As you continuously underfuel yourself, your body's going to adapt in its ability to store carbohydrates. So it's not going to be able to store them as efficiently as it would if you were eating enough to fuel yourself appropriately. So what that means is you're not going to have enough carbohydrate left in your reserves to fuel a long-term endurance event. So thinking about a marathon, maybe, right? If you're underfueling yourself, you're going to crash much faster because you don't have the reserve tank filled.
I think, and with that said, I mean,
So what are the things that like we should look at or be aware of in preventing this? And like, I don't know, what key takeaways, like for anybody listening that maybe has somebody that is an athlete or, is experiencing this or anything like that, what do you think we should look out for?
It's hard to answer because this manifests in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing to pay attention to, do you want me to, should we look at this from maybe a parent perspective, or I don't know how to answer this question. This is tough.
No, I'm sorry. And I didn't mean to make it a difficult question.
No.
I mean, we could take it into different directions. So, I mean, if we have a dietitian listening,
Okay.
obviously we would refer potentially if they're not an expert in, sports. And then maybe even as a parent or, a coach, anything like that, whatever you're comfortable covering.
Sure. I would say, if dietitians that are listening, I think if you listen to our conversation today and you are like, I don't know anything about this is my first time hearing this, I feel uneducated, don't be afraid to dive into research and educate yourself, right? Once if you still feel like this is a little bit out of your scope of practice, like you said, Vicky, refer. Sports dietitians, this is what we're here for. Parents, coaches, pay attention to your athletes, and in terms of their energy levels. If you notice that they aren't performing as well as they used to, if you notice that they are losing weight, you might even start to notice physical signs of malnutrition. Maybe they are starting to get a little wasted in certain areas.
I feel like in younger athletes, it's irritation. They're always irritable.
Yeah. And that's where I was going to go next, is the psychological symptoms. So if hanger is a real thing. So if they start to be irritable and gretzy, and, maybe you also noticed they're anxious a little bit more, or on the opposite side of that, they're a little bit more depressed. Maybe they don't like doing the things that they used to do. This gets into a little bit more disordered eating, but if you notice that they're only eating one meal a day, if they're refusing meals, if they're not eating meals in front of other people, if they are only choosing healthful foods, right? So they don't want to eat the Pop-Tarts for breakfast because that's deemed unhealthy, and they'll only eat, I don't know, a smoothie or something, right? Of course, if you have that open relationship with your athlete and they're comfortable saying that they've missed their menstrual cycle, that's a huge red flag right away, right? We should need no other sort of indicator, and we're automatically referring in that regard. For athletes yourself, if you are noticing that all of the things that I just mentioned, actually, if you're noticing them within yourself, it's something to talk about. We're not diagnosing anyone here today, but if some of the signs and symptoms that I've mentioned, if you're checking off some of them, it's not a diagnosis, but it's worth talking about to maybe your athletic trainer, or if you have a dietitian available, it's worth starting the conversation. Because like I said, you don't want to catch this when it's too late. That could mean long-term repercussions if we don't catch this in time. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely covers it. And, I know it's like kind of like a heavy topic, but, we feel like it's important to cover. And I do appreciate, so again, I'm going to do a little self-promo. You kind of alluded to a little bit of orthorexia, and we did cover that in an episode in, I think, our last season. So, we did cover that a little bit, but with that, the obsession with healthy eating, which I guess would be another kind of potential red flag in terms of, what would an athlete or student even, that's something to consider. So, but yeah, I mean, Emily, I think this has been a great episode and very informative, first of all. But any like final takeaways that, you want to leave listeners or even us with, me more so, I think, but just like knowledge base, like final words of wisdom.
Oh gosh, my final words of wisdom. I feel like a broken record. I think a lot of this can be ameliorated if we are more comfortable talking about our reproductive health, just as a culture. Yes, I think if we're more open and honest with those conversations, we could catch a lot of this sooner instead of, a lot of scenarios where I give a presentation and then young girls are coming up to me afterwards saying, I haven't had a period in 3 months. Is that bad? That shouldn't be how we're catching this. We have room to grow in how we prevent this from happening, and it could stem from conversations to screening to educational programs to having a dietitian on staff. Right.
Well, and I think I'm sorry. I think we're circling back to like what Emily F said. Like, it's okay to have those conversations, and it's okay to like, you want to touch on those, and you don't want it to be like this afterthought or like pushing it off to the other person, like, oh, this other person's going to catch it, or so. Like, we have to stop doing that. And I'm not saying all dietitians do it.
Right.
I think a lot of times we get the person when it's been pushed off.
Yeah.
And I've shared, my stories about healthcare in the past. Like, we get ignored a lot, like especially women get ignored a lot. We get like, oh, you're just hormonal or whatever. Like, we get a lot of those excuses and passed off, and then we find these problems too late, or late where it didn't necessarily have to be a problem. So I do think us in the healthcare field need to, be comfortable with the uncomfortable, like you said, and just making sure that we're not passing the buck, because I do feel like that happens a lot because people maybe aren't necessarily trained to have those uncomfortable conversations, which is another important part where I talked about this in the beginning, like the continuing ed. Like, I know a lot of times our jobs force us to take specific types of continuing education, but if you feel like you're not comfortable having those conversations, maybe try doing some sort of continuing ed based off of that, or, going to like, I don't know. I don't know. There's got to be trainings or something out there that could help with that. But if that's like an area that you're not comfortable in, it's time to get comfortable in it,
I also think just being in practice, like, do we all remember whether it was during our internship or if we're still doing it, like our first counseling sessions, and like how, or first inpatient, like you were nervous, you maybe didn't say everything you should. And so the more you do it, the more easy it becomes. And I think it just comes with practice too, because CEUs can tell you what to do, right? But then it's like being in the physical room or with the men and boys, and it's like, oh God, this is so awkward. I'm sweating now. I don't want to ask the question, but I know I need to. Like, it happens to all of us. It's not just on the client end, it's our end too. So I definitely think practice doesn't make perfect, but helps improve.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that, because I was thinking that today. Recently I did a site visit at one of our sites for Marywood, and they were talking about how the student got a lot more experience counseling. Now, that's not like an official counseling session, but they were still getting that experience to at least talk to them, ask questions. Because I feel like a lot of students, if there's students listening, like, have that apprehension to have conversations, and like they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous to counsel this patient. And you just have to think of it as a conversation, and you first have to build that rapport and be able to ask questions and be able to broach the subjects, and have the way of words to get the information that you need. And then eventually, once you're comfortable and get more practice with that, now again, that's an art form, and I'm sure it takes practice makes perfect, but once you're getting more comfortable with that component, then the clinical stuff comes more naturally later on, and you're able to incorporate that knowledge into those sessions. The hardest part about counseling isn't necessarily the clinical knowledge, it's the conversational part. And I think that's what intimidates students a lot, and even other dietitians. Like, we have to have those conversations. So but it was just funny that kind of tied into what happened recently. Like, they were talking about that. I was like, oh, but that's the hardest part, right? Like, that's what you need to practice in. It's not the clinical stuff. Like, that stuff can be, learned. So, but yeah. Well, Emily, this has been great. we appreciate you so much, and we're definitely going to share your socials. And you also gave us a really awesome list of a few resources and accounts. So do you want to just, if you want to mention any right now, or
Yeah. Excuse me. The ones that I mentioned, I don't have a TikTok. I'm still an OG Instagram girl. So I can imagine that some of the handles that I've mentioned to you guys are also TikTok. One of them I mentioned was called Her Athlete. She is a very heavy science, evidence-based female athlete educator. There's also Dr. Stacy Sims is someone who doesn't necessarily do a lot of work in like LEA and REDS in particular. She just studies female athletes and physiology and hormones and how it all relates to nutrition. So if you are a science nerd, she is great. And then I also have the book. Oh my gosh, the title's gone when I need it. Finding Your Sweet Spot. Written by a sports dietitian, Rebecca McConville. It's a very easy read, thin book. I think she self-published, so it's wonderful to support a dietitian who is self-publishing. But she gives a really great synopsis of REDS, and she goes through each of kind of like the big topics that we talked about tonight. So if you are a book lover, a bibliophile, that's a great book to have too.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for those resources. We will put them in the comments or area where you can find them. And I bet we're just going to tag all those other references you noted there. So feel free if you guys want to hop on too. We're welcome to have you. So we learned a lot about REDS and the female athlete triad and LEA. So much great information. I'm overwhelmed with how amazing all of our guests are. So Emily, you were fantastic. So of course we don't just end our session.
Well, I was gonna say, she says the sweet spot, so it's a perfect transition to our sweet or sour. Sorry, I had to like stick that in there, but go ahead.
Emily, whichever one you want to start with, sweet or sour, give them to us, please.
I'm gonna start with my sour. The school semester starts on Monday, and I'm not quite ready yet. I still have a lot of like projects to put together and curriculum to get together. So I need to buckle down and put my head to the grind, and I'll be fine. Everything will be fine, one day at a time. But it's a little bit of a stressful moment because of that. My sweet, however, since this was my first year teaching, this was my first summer off. I use that term loosely because I was still doing stuff, but I had a lot of time and I needed some sort of creative pursuit. So I started creative writing. I love reading. And I'm a big sci-fi fantasy girl. So I am trying to manifest some sort of creative writing pursuit in that regard. So it's been a fun change of pace recently. But yeah.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Good for you. Is it like, can I ask what kind, or is it just like, is it like fiction stories? Is it like essays? Is it poems? Or if you're not really sure, that's
I'm
fine too.
dabbling in kind of all of it. I've dabbled in a little bit of poetry so far. Most of it has been more like literary fiction, and kind of fantasy sci-fi fiction. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, a fun fact that I probably know about you. You're a bibliophile, truly. So, so that's kind of tying into it, I feel like, a little bit.
Oh, yeah, because I read so much and I enjoy reading different genres. It's almost like, it feels like a lot of bravado, but it's like, let me try this. I feel like I can do this. It's like, let's give it a whirl.
Yeah, that's awesome. Emily, is it okay if I go next, since mine is very similar to Emily's? So I agree. I can't believe the semester's starting, and I also have some work I need to get done before it starts. And I unfortunately do not get summers off. I work all year round, so that it just creeped up on me way too quick. Like, I just was like, what? How did this happen? When did it become August? And why, where did the time go? I feel like I've been busy, but I just don't know where it went. So that is also my sour, because I'm also teaching some classes that I was hoping to kind of not teach, but mainly food systems management, just because that's not my expertise at all. So, I mean, I'm happy to do it. It's not a problem, but I just I'm I got to refresh my memory. So that'll be fun. So that's my sour as well. And then my sweet, I'm going to plug Emily, Emily F. I got to see Emily yesterday, and she gave me some of Emily's delights. She gave me pickles and salsa and some of her amazing produce that her husband Joe grows. And I've done a number on that jar of pickles, Emily, and I'm not embarrassed to say it because it's very good.
I'm here. Well, that goes right into my suite because I made Emily's Delights yesterday. That was my Sunday. I was baking zucchini bread with I picked a zucchini. You can't even see how big it is in the screen, but it was humongous. It was probably 3/4 of my arm length. So I made zucchini bread. I made salsa from all our home grain tomatoes, our peppers, including 1 jalapeno in there. The only thing I didn't grow was the lime. Okay, I can't grow those. I know, right?
What?
The pickles. So those are like my thing. I love doing it. The only other thing I make that I didn't make yesterday is homemade pesto. I had plenty of basil. I could have made it with, I just ran out of time. So so that was my sweet. I ended up getting all my Emily's Delights made. And I will, end on the sour, but I mean, it's not like horrible, but I don't think I'm going down to the beach again this summer. So I'm a little bummed about that, but I'm going to make the most of it in my backyard and with my fire pit and everything on the deck and the beautiful weather. So, we'll try and make the most of it, but I am sad I might not get to see the ocean too soon here. So
yeah.
Life goes on.
We didn't get to the beach this year at all, and I'm sad about it. I like to sit by the water. It's just very calming. But
exactly.
Were you saying you didn't like
I didn't get to the beach at all this summer either.
Yeah.
Fortunately. Busy summers writing and making Emily's Delights and doing schoolwork.
Yeah, I just worked. I mean, I think I mentioned this in the past that I did go to Chicago. So, I mean, that was my vacation in a way. I mean, that was nice.
Yeah.
But
yeah, definitely.
So I definitely got to do something fun. It just wasn't the beach, which I do love the beach. And that is like the quintessential vacation of there's a relaxing vacation and there's like an activity vacation. And that was the activity vacation. So I need a relaxation vacation soon.
You do. Yes, you do.
So
well, maybe like okay, that's true. Or maybe the fall, you'll get a nice early fall kind of one where it's still nice. Because I think our fall is shifting. I think all our seasons are shifting a little. So I think we've got summer until like early October now.
Yeah, I hate that because I like the fall and I like October as fall. I do too. But I do agree. I think September is now a summer month in Pennsylvania at least. So, but
excuse me.
Well, I think that about wraps us up, right? So thank you so much, Emily. We appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. And, I'm sure we'll be asking you again in the future because I know there's going to be other topics that we're going to want to cover at some point.
Yeah, to our listeners, we're going to have repeat people. Pretty much every guest is going to come back on. So because they have just amazed us and we had such a great time and it was great seeing Emily again because we, from a distance, Instagram, whatnot, we've connected, but a long time since we've seen each other. So I'll have to pop up to Marywood and see everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I know I've been asking you to guest speak for a while, Emily F. So you got to just come up.
Ask me again. Maybe I will.
Oh, okay.
Then I'll finally tell you yes. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and end it out. Again, Emily, thanks so much for joining us. So if you're in the mood for a boost of juice, check out freshly squeezed episodes on Sundays of the RD Squeeze. And we will see you next episode on the RD Squeeze. Take care, everyone. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. We will always take topics you want to hear about, so message us for any topics you want to see covered on the RD Squeeze. Don't forget, it's Dietitian with a T. We'll see you next time on the RD Squeeze.